It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher.
I think our track record in the last 20 years, how many NFC East titles, playoff appearances, and appearances in the NFC Championship game, those are some of the metrics I look at, and I'll compare our record with almost anybody.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Yep, Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It dropped this morning at 6 a.m. A new one drops every Monday and Thursday during the offseason with Adam Kaplan and our Monday Football at 4 guest, Geoff Mosher, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from skin care to cosmetic surgery, go to ilovelyle.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4. Here we go. Geoff Mosher is in the house as we got a lot of football stuff to get into. I'm getting kind of juiced up for this draft. I love it's the one advantage of being a lousy team is that this time is so much more enjoyable. So we'll get in on the draft here in just a second. But I want to start with this, Geoff Mosher. We talked on Wednesday with you about whether the Eagles could be a player at all in free agent. I'm talking about lowest level of free agent with their cap situation. And now all of a sudden I'm seeing all this stuff about quarterbacks. And one quarterback that's come up is Marcus Mariota. Another one that I saw is Jacoby Brissett. I also saw Ryan Fitzpatrick has some interest in a team like the Eagles because he thinks he could compete. So could the Eagles be a player for a veteran-level quarterback with any real money?
I think they could. I mean, they made it pretty clear last year at this time that they no longer wanted to invest heavy money in backup quarterbacks, but a year later, they're in a way different position, and they've got a quarterback under a rookie contract who doesn't cost a lot. So theoretically, you could take on a little bit of a high-priced veteran, except for the fact that there's also the $6 million cap hit that they're taking from Wentz. But that cap hit is being taken. There's nothing they can do about it, and they still have to put a team together. So, yes, they need to get under the cap. Yes, they will have to make some moves in free agency, not nearly the type of moves they were able to make last year when they got Javon Hargrave and then traded for Darius Slay. But they clearly have to make moves. Quarterback makes sense. And as we talked about before, Mike, I mean, I can't sit here and tell you I know what the new coaching staff feels about Jalen Hurts. I don't know that yet. But I did say that if they were to kind of go out and get a Marcus Mariota, who is still young and who still probably has a lot of upside and played fairly well in his limited spot last year, that might signal or indicate to you that they're not completely sold on Jalen Hurts. And, of course, if they draft a quarterback at number 6 overall, that would indicate to you the same. And so we kind of have to sit back and watch what they do. I think there's a difference in getting a guy like Mariota versus Fitzpatrick to me, because Mariota is still someone who you may view can be rebuilt into a starting quarterback that you're going to have for the next several years. Whereas Fitzpatrick, you kind of know that you're just getting a veteran backup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Brissett, obviously, you see this a lot, Geoff, when when you're a new coach, you try to get someone you're familiar with who knows your system so that you can use them as a teacher. So I want Jacoby Brissett to try to help teach Jalen Hurts. And if he can't teach Jalen Hurts and Hurts isn't very good, I feel very strong and comfortable going to Brissett. That's why, to me, he makes the most sense. However, I can't imagine Brissett's going to come for the money that the Eagles can afford. I mean, I think he was making $15 million last year.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about the market, though. I mean, is there going to be a market for him to start somewhere where he can make 15 or more million? He may have to take a pay cut. It's almost like the Didi Gregorius thing with the Phillies. I mean, a really good year that last year, but the market shrunk so that when he came back, he's basically making the same money over the next 2 years. He didn't able to get a pay raise despite having a very good year because of the market. So Brissett's a good quality backup. I don't know if any team's going to pay $15 million for a backup, but if he's starting somewhere or competing to start somewhere, there may be a heavily incentive-laden deal, which may look like $8 or $9 million from a upfront money, but with the opportunity to make even more. That's pretty much how Mariota, his contract is structured as for next year. If he winds up winning a lot of games, he makes a whole lot more money, and we'll see if that contract still remains or if he's just cut.
All right. Speaking of contracts, on Inside the Bird this morning, I should say, you did a lot of cap talk. I want to give you a couple cap situations. Let's start with some bigger names. Guys like Brandon Brooks, Lane Johnson on that offensive line. Are those guys that the Eagles you expect to approach about restructuring?
Possibly. The difficulty in restructuring with both of those guys is their injury history. Even more so with Brandon Brooks coming off 2 Achilles. You don't want to kick the can that much further down the road for a guy who is already 32.
He's 31. Johnson's 30.
Right, 31.
I did a little bit of research for this conversation, Mosher.
Sounds like it. So, yeah. So I get confused. Kelsey's the one that's 33, obviously. So, yeah. So, coming off those 2 injuries, I don't know, but that is going to be one of the only other ways that they can lower the cap number.
Roseman does, he approaches these guys, restructures these deals, essentially kicking the can down the road so that they get out of the cap problem now. They have cap problems 2 years from now. The problem, if they do that 2 years from now, those guys are now 33 and 32 instead of 31 and 30, and it's harder to redo it again.
Yeah, and the thing is, depending on how they restructure it, sometimes there's only like $1 million or $2 million that get added in those dummy years. And it doesn't really hurt you that much 3 or 4 years down the road, even if they're not on the team, because the cap theoretically goes up, and it should go up even after this rough year with that new deal that they're kind of, I guess, on the verge of signing with ABC. So the cap should raise, barring any kind of unforeseen pandemics or anything, other kind of disasters. So it doesn't hurt you that much. But the problem would be if you restructure to the point where, like, say this coming year or next year, Brandon Brooks gets hurt, and then you've got all that money to go into someone who's not playing. You can theoretically raise the argument that hurts you with any player that you have, that you value, who, if they get hurt and they're out for the year, then they're taking up money that, and that's not really providing you value at that point.
Yeah, I guess a couple other guys that you're kind of kicking the can, down the road on the other side would be Fletcher Cox. He has 4 years left on the deal. They have already restructured twice for him for cap problems. Another guy, I guess, would be Darius Slay, who you just got, who makes some decent money. And then, of course, you have Brandon Graham, and we've talked a little bit about Barnett. But Fletcher, Darius, and Brandon Graham, I guess, are those prime candidates to also be approached for a restructure?
If either a restructure, Darius Slay to me is a big wild card, because when they traded for him last year, they redid his deal so that it was very cap friendly in 2020, and then not so cap friendly this coming year in 2021. And so he's not coming off a great year. He was better. He was good. He was better than what they've had in the past, but he certainly had his struggles in those few games against Metcalf, against Devontae Adams, and I think somebody else. So I think the team has to look at it now and say, do we want to restructure, or does it make more sense to maybe even move on? Because he is 31, or he's going to be 31, didn't have the greatest year last year, and they really need to rebuild that secondary. In fact, if they move Avonte Maddox to the slot like we all expect, you tell me who's starting opposite Darius Slay, because they don't have anybody on the roster that I think is a natural slide in. So they either have to start a kid that they draft, or they need to sign a veteran in free agency who's not going to be very expensive. That's my roundabout way of saying it's probably not going to be a very good secondary / cornerback tandem. So does it make sense to have a high-priced cornerback if you already know you're not going to be great in that area?
Unless you draft a guy at 6.
Even so, the hit percentage on first-round corners, it's a gamble. A lot of them don't work out, and some of them that do take a year or two anyway to develop. It's very rare that you see a guy. I know the Browns did well with Denzel Ward, Jair Alexander on Green Bay, but man, if you go look at first-round corners, some of them either just never pan out or take a couple of years before they do.
I guess the point that you're making, the point that I would be, I guess, countering would be, if you're drafting a guy at number 6, he's playing and getting the snaps, so you would at least have a warm body playing that position, as opposed to what you're suggesting is, I'm going to throw Maddox out there again, or I couldn't even come up with a name right now. Roby Coleman's a free agent. Mills is a free agent. You can't even say that you're going to. You think Mills comes back?
He could possibly come back at safety, I would think. If they're going to play a little bit more cover two, I can see maybe some value to having him back there. Or if they just want him as a sub package guy who covers tight ends and backs out of the backfield as like a third safety, I could see that, especially since you can probably get him at a very, very team friendly rate. I don't think he's going to break the market anywhere. So he is a body who's versatile, and that's valuable for them. So I could see him being back. But to answer your question, though, neither he nor Roby Coleman is going to start on the outside opposite Slay. So that still leaves them with a very big void there. And you're right. Other than Michael Jacquet or Braylon Arnold, I don't know who their candidates would be. Trevor Williams to come back and try to start in that position there.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things, the fact that's why at number 6 you wonder. Now you guys did a whole thing on linebacker for Inside the Birds. It looks like Singleton is going to be back. Davion Taylor, a lot of people wondered, he was a third-round pick. What can I expect there? Would they consider drafting a guy at number 6? I mean, Micah Parsons is draftable at that position. It's not often you have a linebacker that is draftable at that position. So let's kind of get your take on what you see happening at that position this offseason.
Well, Michael Parsons has been kind of compared to that new wave hybrid linebacker, right? Who can play linebacker but also runs like a safety, kind of like an Isaiah Simmons from Clemson the year before. But if you look at Howie Roseman's draft history, we already know, even beyond Howie Roseman, that the Eagles have not drafted a linebacker, like a natural 4-3 linebacker since '79. And I can't remember the last time they took a safety in the first round. In recent memory, I don't think ever under Andy Reid. So a guy that can play linebacker and safety pick. To me, what's that?
I said no. Dawkins was a second-round pick. Nate Allen was a second-rounder.
Right, Jaquan Jarrett,
your boy
second-rounder.
Jaquan Jarrett. I was going to say.
Yeah, even guys like from the 2004 Super Bowl, Mike. Why can't his name? Who's the guy? Michael. Who started at safety next to Dawkins on the Super Bowl team in 2004?
Michael Lewis.
And then Michael Lewis, right? He wasn't a first-round pick either. So it's been quite a while. So all I see is when I see a guy like Micah Parsons who can be a great linebacker and a great safety or some kind of hybrid, all I see is the two positions that the Eagles least like to take in the first round. So I can't imagine that unless they're starting to be progressive. And listen, the Eagles, they pull some things out like last year taking Jalen Hurts in the second round that you don't see coming, and then they tell you how progressive they are. So maybe they're into that, but I just don't see it. If they're picking top 10, to me, it's either an offensive lineman, a pass rusher, or a quarterback. Maybe a wide receiver. Maybe, but that would, their history doesn't say that.
All right, so does that suggest that you're going back to Alex Singleton, and I wouldn't even know who would play next to him?
Well, that was the big debate discussion between Adam and I in the podcast. I mean, right now, your two most likely starting linebackers, I would think, would be Alex Singleton and TJ Edwards. I think they'll be a nickel a whole lot. You're talking about one guy who is an undrafted free agent and the other guy who was undrafted and spent a couple of years in Canada before the Eagles signed him. So there's not a lot of proven talent there. And you mentioned Davion Taylor and people wondering what to expect from a guy who was a third-round pick last year. But I can tell you the question should be, why was he picked in the third round? Because as Adam and I have reported several times, you'd be hard-pressed to find a team that had him ranked higher than the fifth round. And it's not just that he lacks experience at linebacker because he started late in high school and in college, but he lacks experience even in his college experience. He was not a stack linebacker. He was kind of a spread linebacker who was out there covering. So he has to learn a whole lot. And obviously last year was a difficult learning environment because of all the times that people weren't allowed at the facility, including during the season on Monday and Tuesdays. So he has a very, very, very big gap to bridge, and I'm not sure that he's ready to do that yet.
So essentially, it sounds like a guy who's at least another season away from contributing on the defensive side of the ball when you're talking about your third-round pick from a year ago, right? Davion Taylor.
Well, I'm sure the coaching staff would like to be able to coach him up to at least be a sub-package linebacker and use some of that great athleticism and speed that he has. But when we talk about coaching a guy up, I think it's notable to say that their new linebackers coach, Nick Rallis, has never coached the position as a coach. He's been an assistant. He's never led the room, and he's 27 years old, which is the same age as Alex Singleton. So when you ask who's coaching these linebackers up, you're talking about a guy who's not had a whole lot of experience coaching.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast. You know, listen to the latest Inside the Birds podcast to get more of the expectations for Taylor. And you know, real quick on Alex Singleton, they like him enough to bring like that. They feel comfortable. He played because Nate Geary got hurt, but they like him enough that they feel okay bringing him back and playing him, right?
Well, they should, because I don't know who else. If you don't like Alex Singleton among Eagles linebackers, then I don't know who you like.
is he the bad guy on the good, you know, like is he Jahlil Okafor his rookie year with the Sixers or Michael Carter-Williams? Like someone's got to make a tackle.
You know, I felt that way when he first started to play, and by the end of the year, I had at least convinced myself that he can play in the NFL. Now, we see this all the time. Guys play well in a small spurt, and then they regress or they improve. I have no idea what the trajectory is. And I do worry, Mike, about the level of coaching he's now going to get after he actually proved to be a decent player. And is that going to lead to any regression? But I do think he can play he's got a good nose for the ball, and he's fast enough to make tackles. I don't know if he's a great coverage linebacker. I thought he struggled in that last year at times. You saw in the Green Bay game, you know, that touchdown to Tunyon, and there were a couple of throws to the tight end where he was kind of in his own coverage, but didn't look like he took a deep enough drop. So that obviously has to be worked on. But the pickings are slim here. He's the best of what you got.
You know what, though? If he's like the second guy talent, like if he's like the other guy and you have that guy like Parsons and then Singleton's the other guy, he's the guy that does the dirty work, and then you have Parsons who can be like, you don't see that happen. Like I you know, I'm doing this new segment called Mike's Mailbag, and one of the questions was trade down. And I love the idea of trading down, because then I feel like let these guys take these quarterbacks, let them take these receivers, and then you take the defensive player that you think fits best, whether it be Farley or Surtain or Parsons, or if there's someone else you like. They're the three favorites for me if I'm in like the 8, 9, 10 range.
Yeah, I wouldn't trade back too much if I was moving from 6, right, because somebody wanted a quarterback there, and I was able to get a future first. Absolutely, I'm on that. Yeah. I'm not going to trade down just to acquire picks, because I don't want to bypass anybody on my board that might be really, really good. And the past few drafts have shown us that sometimes guys who are top 5, like Jerry Jeudy last year and some others, sometimes you think these top 5 guys are available from 5 to 10. So you got to just sit tight there first and see who's there. And by the way, real quick, I know you know this, but I'm reminding the listeners, I'm just the messenger. Right, I'm not saying I agree with their philosophy on never taking a linebacker in the first round. I'm not saying that if I were in charge of the Eagles that I would completely dismiss Micah Parsons. I'm just going based on what they know and what they do.
Okay, real quick. They are 12 free agents. I'm just going to rip through them. Is any of these guys back? Peters, Mills, Sudfeld, Roby Coleman, Curry, Ridgeway, Richard Rodgers, LeBlanc, Duke Riley, Corey Clement, Rudy Ford, Nate Geary. Any of them back?
All right. I think we talked about Mills, that there's a possibility he can come back on a one-year deal maybe. I actually think there's a possibility Vinny Curry can come back, because he's always willing to play for the hometown team, not a lot of money. And to be honest with you, we don't know what's going to happen with Derek Barnett. I assume he's going to be restructured and still be a part of the team. But Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, and Josh Sweat, that's all you got right now. And Sweat is a guy that they carefully monitor because of his injury history with his knees. So if Barnett were hurt, or even if Sweat hurt, or BG's hurt, who's starting? You really don't have a plethora of options. So you're probably going to wind up signing a veteran in free agency and drafting a guy. So why not have that veteran in free agency be your own in-house guy who has, you know, done everything for you and come back? And, you know, I think there's a chance Curry can come back. And I also think Richard Rodgers probably has a shot to come back, because he's not going to break the market anywhere. You could probably bring him back on a one-year deal. You're going to be moving on from Zach Ertz. You need a solid number 2 tight end, or number 3 in case you draft one.
I was going to say, unless you take Pitts.
Yeah, but even if you did, you still need a 3rd tight end. I mean, you could sign him, and then if he doesn't make it out of camp, no big deal. But these are contracts I'm talking about that are going to be 1 year with very little guaranteed money.
Yeah, and I guess that's where the Eagles are going to have to shop. There was an interesting release, I guess it was over the weekend, that Tyrell Williams, who signed that big deal with the Raiders, Sirianni had worked with him with Detroit. He had 1,000 yards in San Diego.
Sure.
I think it was San Diego at the time. So he would be an interesting name. I saw Malik Hooker played for the Colts, so he would be another. All those the Colts have a lot of free agents who are coming off injury, so keep an eye on that as well. All right, Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds, the podcast, it drops on Mondays and Thursdays in the offseason. So the new one is out today. They'll have another one out for you on Thursday. And, of course, all week long during Football 4, Geoff is back on Wednesday's show, and we'll have plenty more as the offseason continues. We're getting close to free agency, March 17th. We'll have all that here on Football at 4. All right, Moshe, thanks, man.
That went by quickly, man. It was always fun.
Always good. And we got plenty more to do tomorrow with Andrew. He is Geoff Mosher, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Football at 4 is brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. For everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery, go to ilovelyle.com or call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4 on the Sports Bash.